Hey, what's happening, guys? What is going on? You guys have tuned into Rules for Rebels. Today is Wednesday, February 1st, 2023. We're going to be covering the news today. We got a couple big stories to talk about in today's video. Today we have the Fed rate hike announcement. We're expecting a 25 basis point rate hike, but it could be as high as 50. And if it is 50 basis points, we're likely to see markets tank today. Another big story for the day, CNBC announced that PayPal to lay off 2,000 employees. That's 6% of the company. We're going to talk a little bit about PayPal. I think PayPal is a company who 10 years ago was like one of the biggest leaders in the payment space. And I think they were kind of riding on their name recognition as well as kind of their first mover advantage. They didn't really adapt when the rest of the payment space was adapting. Right now, buy now, pay later is the biggest thing around. Companies are making a ton of money off of it. And you know what's weird? PayPal was actually offering credit and financing like way back in 2012, if not earlier. But they didn't do a very good job of advertising it. And they didn't make it nearly as easy to use and as user-friendly as companies like Klarna and Sezzle and Afterpay and a lot of these other companies have. So, PayPal's really dropped the ball. Another thing that's become really big in the payment space is platforms like Patreon or Subscribestar or even OnlyFans. The ability of individual creators to be able to take payments. PayPal never really got into that space either. And when you look at Shopify, the biggest e-commerce platform out there, they're hooked up with Stripe. And so PayPal seems to continue to be less and less relevant, and they aren't doing themselves any favors with some of the recent things that they've been doing. You guys remember, probably within the last 6 months or so, PayPal had announced that they were going to start fining users $2,500 for spreading quote-unquote misinformation. They put that into their privacy policy. When people realized it, people were outraged. People said, I'm closing my PayPal account. And PayPal said, oh my gosh, we don't know how this wound up on the site. This was an accident. This was a mistake. And nobody really bought it. And then they said it wasn't supposed to happen. And then about 3 weeks later, after kind of all the outrage died down, then PayPal quietly slipped that back into their policy. So PayPal does have, if you go read their terms of service, they did put it back in their policy that you can be fined at $2,500 for misinformation. So those are kind of the biggest stories of today. PayPal laying off 2,000 employees and the Fed rate hike that we're expecting today. There's another thing I wanted to talk about in today's video before we kind of really jump into the news. There's an interesting video making the rounds on the internet. I actually happen to see this on World Star Hip Hop. And the title of the video is Dropping Gems. Chad Ocho Cinco Johnson reveals he saved 83% of his salary by wearing fake jewelry and flying Spirit. And, in this channel, we've talked a lot about financial independence and the FIRE movement. And a story that keeps popping up in the news is how 68% of millennials, 68% of millennials who are living 68% of millennials who are earning six figures are still living paycheck to paycheck. Now, there are some areas of the country that are incredibly expensive, San Francisco, Manhattan. If you live in one of these areas, making six figures isn't a ton of money. But outside of a handful of areas, unless you have a ton of kids or a really bad, really expensive medical condition, there's really no excuse to be making six figures and living check to check. On this channel, we talk a lot about the FIRE movement. The FIRE movement, in a nutshell, is trying to save as much money, is trying to make as much money as possible, save as much money as possible. Ideally, you want to be able to save 50% of your salary so that you can invest it, and then you can retire at a young age. Now, one thing I always say about the FIRE movement, it's kind of like minimalism. I realize there's some people out there who choose to spend more money, who want to live a little bit more of a luxurious lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think everybody could benefit from having from learning some lessons from the FIRE community or the financial independence community. Being financially independent gives you more choices and gives you more leverage. I'll just give you guys a perfect example right now. Right now, a lot of people are being called back into the office, right? Their employers want them back in the office. They don't want them working remote anymore. If you are somebody who lives paycheck to paycheck and your boss says you have to come in the office, you really don't have much power to bargain. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you need that job and you're going to have to go back into the office. If you have 6 months, a year, even better, 2 years of living expenses saved up and your boss says, hey, we need you to come back into the office, well, you can push back a little bit because, if you wind up losing your job or if you decide to leave that job, you got plenty of money to sit on the sidelines for a while and go look for a new job or go look for a remote job. So being financially independent gives you power, it gives you leverage, and it's a good thing to have in your life. And I kind of think of it like minimalism. When it comes to minimalism, there's some people who want to be able to fit everything they own into the back of their car so that they can pack up and move at a moment's notice. You have other people who are digital nomads, and they say, I only own 10 things and everything I own can fit in a backpack. Well, I think we all could benefit from being a little bit more minimalistic. That doesn't mean we have to be able to fit our lives in a backpack. Maybe for you that means, that bowling ball that's been sitting in your closet for 5 years that you haven't used. Maybe you sell that, or you donate it to Goodwill. Those winter jackets that you haven't worn in years. Maybe you get rid of those. Maybe you clean out a junk drawer, right? You can kind of introduce minimalism into your life without going to the extreme and only owning 10 things. And I think the same thing is true of the FIRE movement or financial independence. I think we could all do a little bit more to be frugal, to save more money. We could all take on some habits that people in the FIRE movement practice without necessarily like destroying our social lives or saying we're never going to buy anything again. But let's take a listen to, I'm actually going to play it for you guys. Let's take a listen to this interview with Chad Ocho Cinco Johnson. He was a pretty good, very popular wide receiver back around 2010. I think he probably played from like 2007 to 2014 or something like that. I think I used to have him on my fantasy team. He was kind of an outrageous player. I think he used to have kind of a lot of stunts on the field. He'd score a touchdown and then pull a Sharpie out of his sock and wind up signing a ball for a fan. But he talks about how he would buy jewelry at Claire's. He wouldn't go see Jacob the jeweler and drop multiple six figures on jewelry. He would buy his fake jewelry at Claire's, and he said he would fly Spirit Air. He said, as long as I get from point A to point B, that's all I need. He said it's impossible to, quote unquote, stunt on people forever. And he says, spending a bunch of money to impress people you don't like and who don't care about you is basically just a recipe to go broke. But I thought this was a great clip, and I thought it kind of really ties into this story about 68% of millennials earning six figures are still living check to check. So let's give this a listen.
I want to make enough money I can fly
private?
Yeah.
Shh. I ain't flying private. I'm Spirit. Put me on Spirit. Exit row. Window seat. That's all I need. Long as I get from point A to point B. I don't need private. Athletes more so. If you can get to a point in your career where your name becomes bigger than anything you can purchase, there's your value. Wow. My name itself, Ocho Cinco at one point, even still to this day, is bigger than... Why am I driving a Ferrari? Why am I driving a Rolls Royce and I'm Ocho? Oh, we talk about jewelry and watches and chains. Never bought real anything when I was playing. Never. What was the point? I went to Claire's.
So all you do...
Yes. For what? What am I doing it for? The women don't deal with you anyway because of who you are.
Right.
And then the other women who really doing their homework, don't Google how much you're making already.
Right.
Why am I buying a $50,000 watch? $80,000 watch? What time is it real quick, please?
It's 20 minutes to 4.
How much that cost me?
It ain't cost you nothing.
Because time is free. So what I'm paying for?
Right.
For what? I'm Ocho. What's the point?
Right.
There's nothing I can buy that's bigger than my name alone. So it made no sense. But everybody's caught up in image and looking a certain way and being rich. It's me. It's pointless. You know how hard it is to live like that all the time, consistently, and be fly every day?
Yeah.
Jewelry and... Listen, eras of rappers. Think about the era before us.
Right.
Everybody was flashy, stunned. And after 10 years, what happens?
They ain't flashy, they ain't stuff.
No, you can't. It's impossible to sustain.
Right.
It's impossible. People, social media. Well, if I spin this bag, I'm going to just go make it back. It ain't like you think.
No.
And people, they think the cure and the fix for the problem is, well, give me more money, I'm going to be all right. But the more you make, the more you spend.
Right.
If you have no discipline and no structure.
Yes, absolutely.
Every time.
Yes.
Every time. Well, just give me more and more. No, the more you get, the more you're going to spend. And people ain't going to listen because we are caught up in looking a certain way, living a certain way, trying to appease others who don't really care nothing about you.
Yeah.
Just to say, oh, I got it.
Wow.
Well, shit, I got it too and I had it for almost 30 years. I done saved, 83% of my salary. I don't need validation from nobody on the outside. That's another downfall. In society, we always need validation and acceptance from others. Don't try to live a lifestyle that you know you can't afford.
Right.
You can't do that.
Okay, so I thought that was a great interview. Words of wisdom right there. Chad Ocho Cinco was a dude with a big ego, but he was smart enough to not spend a bunch of money to, again, impress people that he doesn't care about and people that don't care about him. Let's get back into the news. Let's talk about the markets yesterday. Markets closed up yesterday, seemingly based on really no good news and going into a rate hike today. The Dow closed up 368 points. The NASDAQ closed up 190 points, and the S&P 500 closed up 1.46%. Crypto closed up, most top cryptos closed up about 1% or 2%. These markets aren't moving on fundamentals, or they're kind of moving on hope and moving on momentum. We got the Fed rate hike today. Again, we're expecting a 25 basis point hike. A 50 basis point hike would not be out of the question. And I thought I saw an article from Zero Hedge. Okay, here it is. Fed preview, 25 BPS tomorrow, and this is a quote, "The end is very much in sight." How high rates go is less important than how long rates remain high, and it appears that they will stay high for a while. But this is kind of interesting to see a bunch of bankers and even a Fed member or two say that the end might be near. Jay Powell has been pretty clear that we're going to hike rates through 2023 and keep them elevated through 2024. So it's kind of interesting to see that a lot of the bankers, and again, I think maybe one or two Fed members, are saying that that the end might be in sight. A lot of people have been hoping, and I think the markets have been hoping, that the Fed pivots and rate hikes are behind us. But I think for that to happen, it would have to mean that the economy is in a pretty dire situation, which I don't know that would be a good thing. I'll talk about the PayPal story. PayPal to lay off 2,000 employees. That's 6% of the company. We kind of talked about how PayPal is a company that's kind of stalled. I don't think they're going away. I don't think they're going anywhere. But PayPal at one time was pretty much like the only payment processor people used. 10 years ago, if you didn't have PayPal on your website, like there's was a fairly big percent of the population who just wouldn't buy from you because they didn't like putting their credit card into websites, or they only trusted PayPal. They liked the PayPal buyer protection. That's kind of gone away. Right? There still are people who like PayPal, but PayPal doesn't nearly have the dominance that it had a couple years ago, let alone 5, 10, 15 years ago. People love to see when companies lay people off. It shows that the company is trying to be profitable. The stocks will typically go up after they announce layoffs. But at some point, once enough people are laid off, who's left to spend money in this consumer economy that we have? 70% of our economy is consumer spending. And when everybody's laid off and nobody has any money to throw around, nobody has any disposable income, that is not going to be good for the economy. In more bad news for PayPal, Elon Musk and Twitter have filed to become a payment processor. I think I actually talked about this several months back when he initially filed, but it looks like Twitter is going to try to be a payment processor. Whether they're going to try to compete with some of the buy now, pay later services or Stripe or PayPal isn't clear. It may just wind up being some type of tipping thing for Twitter where you could tip people. Maybe they're planning on integrating crypto into Twitter. But Elon Musk and Twitter have filed to become a payment processor. I thought this was interesting. There was an interview that came out yesterday with Bill Gates and his relationship with Epstein. Previously, he'd been questioned about this. He was very uncomfortable. He got very angry that he was asked. He said, "I had dinner with him. That's all. He's dead. What else is there to say?" Well, he was asked again in a recent interview within the past couple days. You could tell he was very uncomfortable. He said, "For the 100th time, I had dinner with him, and I regret it." We do have an interview with Bill Gates' ex-wife, Melinda Gates, who said that she didn't like that he was friends with Epstein, and she said it did play a role in their divorce. She said she met him one time when Bill Gates was hanging around with Epstein so much. She wanted to know what was going on, what that was all about. So she wound up going out to dinner with them and meeting him. She said he was abhorrent, he was evil personified, and she had nightmares about it later. But this was a good buddy of Bill Gates. And I saw a good Bill Gates meme the other day. The meme said, "If you control the currency, you control the nation," which is kind of a famous quote. And it said, "If you control the food supply, you control the people." And it had Bill Gates standing on a farm in overalls. And it said, "Hi, I'm Bill Gates. I'm a farmer." Obviously kind of joking about how Bill Gates is buying up all this farmland in the U.S. We got an article from Zero Hedge titled, "It's Going to Be Spicy. UPS Faces Upcoming Union Spike." Okay, it's a weird title. "It's going to be spicy. UPS faces upcoming union fight. spike in labor costs. The union contract that UPS has is expiring, and the union said the company needs to boost part-time wages to over $20 an hour. They also want air conditioning in the trucks. They don't want cameras in the trucks pointing at drivers. Employees may strike, and UPS is the second largest delivery organization company behind USPS. UPS says they already pay more than competitors, and the average driver makes $42 an hour, and that's not counting their pension and benefits. That would be a pretty big hike. I don't know what UPS is paying now, but historically, UPS is famous for paying people in their warehouses $10 an hour. Also, I believe everybody at UPS has to start off part-time working in the warehouses before they can move up to become a driver or move into other positions. And that may have been raised. I think I saw something in the article about $15 an hour, but literally up until just a couple years ago, people working in UPS sorting facilities and warehouses were making $10 an hour. That's a really tough job. You're working out in the cold and the heat. But people wind up taking the job because people want to become a UPS driver. It's if you don't have a college education, if you don't have a skill, driving for UPS actually is a great way to be able to make a decent wage. And in my old neighborhood, pretty much all my friends' parents worked for UPS. And they had all started out as drivers. So UPS is definitely a company who promotes from within, and that's why people are willing to work in these warehouses for $10 an hour for a couple years to get in at UPS. We have another article from The Hedge. U.S. Treasury says we found no misuse of funds in Ukraine. Zero Hedge says they actually said this with a straight face. Obviously, it's not true. Ukraine is and has always been one of the most corrupt countries in the world. If you go back to 2019, 2020, before this recent conflict with Russia kicked off, there were numerous articles about how corrupt Ukraine was. And I don't know how they say that there's no misuse of funds. I just saw an article the other day that said whoever's in charge of buying food and buying eggs for the troops, it said they were paying 3 to 4 times what the going price for these foods and specifically eggs were. Obviously, what's happening is whoever's in charge of sourcing the food, has a brother-in-law or a buddy or somebody who sells food. He pays 4 times what he should really be paying. Some money gets kicked back to him. We also saw a recent article about a bunch of, deputies or a bunch of people high up in the Ukrainian government wound up resigning because it came out they were buying mansions and luxury cars, taking expensive vacations, going on shopping sprees. There absolutely has been mismanagement of funds. Even in the U.S., even in countries less corrupt than Ukraine, of course there's going to be misuse of funds. Look at our PPP loans and unemployment. We gave away something like $60 trillion in money to fraud. So, in the U.S. we have fraud and corruption and things like that as well. So to think that Ukraine doesn't have those problems is kind of crazy. Also, I've talked about a YouTube channel in the past. It's called Willie0am. Great channel. It's a guy who was former military who's interviewing a lot of people fighting over in Ukraine right now. American citizens, people from all over the world, and people from Ukraine. And you kind of get a good picture and a good insight into what's going on the ground in Ukraine. And again, these are people who are fighting for Ukraine. These are people who are risking their lives for Ukraine. And even they are willing to come out and say corruption is a huge problem. They said they're constantly short on ammunition and weapons and other equipment because it comes in one door, it goes out the back door, a bunch of it winds up getting sold. There's a lot of corruption going on. They talk about how when people are injured, they wind up having to pay money for medical supplies and for medical care because all the medical supplies that were given to them wind up being sold, and then they wind up having to buy it back to get care after they're injured fighting. So the idea that there's no misuse of funds in Ukraine, according to the U.S. Treasury, is just kind of crazy. Chicago crime has risen 63% in the last year, while Illinois' Governor Pritzker insists that crime is going down. What does this mean? Why is this important? Crime is a good indicator for the economy. When crime goes up, it means the economy is getting worse. When crime goes down, it typically means the economy is doing better. Here's another sign that maybe inflation isn't going to be going away as quickly as we think. McDonald's recently came out and said they see inflation sticking around. Their sales have been going up and continue to go up. And McDonald's is building more locations. McDonald's sees inflation sticking around because people are forced to eat the cheapest food available to them, which is McDonald's, which today isn't even that cheap. We talked in a video yesterday about how a single hash brown now costs $3.99. I don't know about you guys. I have it stuck in my head that, a fast food lunch should be around $5. Obviously, it's much more. You go to Subway, you get a foot-long chips and a drink, and it's like $14. The days of a value meal in McDonald's being $3.99 $5.99 or $4.99 are long over. I'm guessing you're paying close to $10, if not over $10. But McDonald's still is some of the cheaper food. It's some of the worst quality food, but it is some of the cheaper food out there. And with inflation wearing down people's pocketbooks, they're forced to eat the cheapest food available. I'll be curious to see how companies like Chipotle and Five Guys wind up faring. I don't wind up eating out much, but after I got out of a volleyball game late a couple weeks back and stopped at Five Guys. I think I've talked to you guys about this. I got a double cheeseburger and like a teeny little kid's fry, and I think it was like $18.68 or something like that, almost $20 for a double cheeseburger, which I can tell has gotten smaller. Shrinkflation in action there, and a small fry, no drink, no milkshake. So I think a lot of these fast casual places that are a little bit more expensive than traditional fast food, I'll be curious to see whether they struggle because they're expensive, or whether to see if they wind up doing well because, maybe people aren't going to eat at Chili's or Applebee's, but they're going to step it down to Chipotle. I'm sorry, Chipotle. You guys always say I say Chipotle wrong. Chipotle. Okay, Wall Street Journal article, a trio of Indiana cities tops the Wall Street Journal and Realtor.com housing index. We're seeing more mid-sized cities become popular destinations. Before everybody was moving to Miami, everybody was moving to the Southeast, Seattle, San Francisco, Colorado. Typically we don't think of a state like Ohio as being a desirable place to live. We don't necessarily think of Indiana as being a super desirable place to live. But with the cost of housing and the cost of living getting so high, these cheaper areas are becoming more attractive. And apparently some of the cities with the best growth are three cities, about 200,000 people in Indiana. When the numbers recently came out about which states have the most people leaving and which states have the most people moving there, I was surprised to see that Ohio was like number 3 or 4. It was like Florida, Texas, and if Ohio wasn't number 3, it was number 4. A lot of people dump on Ohio. Ohio is the butt of a lot of jokes, so I was kind of surprised to see that a ton of people are moving to Ohio, but they actually have really cheap housing. Another story, the demand for cardboard boxes plunges the most we've seen since the Great Recession. That's bad news. What does that mean? That means things aren't being manufactured. That means things aren't being shipped. Not only are a lot of our packages packaged in cardboard, but even items that you buy, even items that you consume that aren't packaged in cardboard come in cardboard crates and cardboard boxes. Just for example, I go to Costco a lot. I buy these salads from Costco, fried pickle salad or the dill pickle salad. If you guys haven't tried it, try that one out. But what do they come in? There's a big cardboard box with like maybe 20 bags of salads inside of it. If the demand for cardboard boxes plunges, that means things aren't being manufactured and things aren't being shipped, since almost everything is either packaged or shipped in cardboard. We had an article from Wolf Street that talked about the most splendid housing bubble in America. They just talked about how much home prices have come down from their peaks and how much they continue to come down in some markets like San Francisco, San Diego, Seattle, Phoenix, Denver, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas. I think San Francisco home prices down 14%, Seattle down 13%, San Diego down 9.9%, Phoenix down 7.7%, Denver down 7.5%, LA down 7.4%, and Las Vegas down 7%. Even though we are seeing home prices slide, when you look at, some markets, homes literally doubled and tripled in price. In other markets, homes were going up 22%, 25%, 30% a year for the past 2 or 3 years. What's a 15% dip when home prices are up 90% over the past couple of years? Doesn't really help out. It'll be interesting to see how much more home prices come down, if at all. Let's see, what notes do we have here? We're still in a recession according to the Fed, the banks. Okay, so we're still in a recession according to the Fed, the bankers, and the media. It's not just tech. The mortgage industry, real estate industry, and manufacturing industry are all beginning to lose jobs as well. Nobody wants to admit we're in a recession, but many of us believe we've been in a recession for over a year. Things are worse than you've been told and worse than the media has let on. Prices have been rising at some of the fastest rates in history, much faster than our paychecks are rising, and our standard of living has been steadily declining. More than a third of young adults are relying on their parents to get by month to month. And according to Fox News, shows declines in disposable. Okay, so the declines in disposable income are the largest measured since 1932, the peak of the Great Depression. And it's, again, the second largest drop ever, only behind 1932. I thought this was kind of interesting. There's a makeup company called NYX Professional Makeup, and they started using bearded men in their ads to sell lipstick. You know, we kind of talk about this. Everybody is trans, everything's trans, even though trans people make up a very small percentage of the population. This makeup company apparently wants to market to trans people instead of women, and women are feeling slighted, they're feeling marginalized, and they say, you know, these ads don't make me want to buy the makeup. And I think this is just kind of another example of go woke, go broke. Let's see. We're seeing a surge in headlines talking about real estate is back on track. We're seeing headlines celebrating how rates are lower and more people are applying for mortgages. The housing crash is canceled. Redfin stock has slumped 96% in the last year. They really need to push and promote real estate. Home builders just reported their earnings, and all three of the major home builders decreased their prices in the last quarter. They're also expecting the average sales price to drop. And in order to move more inventory, these home builders are slashing prices and buying down rates for people. I believe there's a lot of these home builders are willing to buy down your rate to 2.99% for the first year, 5% up until the third year. Or no, okay, 2.99% for the first year. I forget what the third year is. And then they're going to buy it down, so you're capped at 5%. So the only way that these home builders can move homes is to pay a ton of money to get your rate down to something reasonable. Let's see, the last housing crash, cancellation rates were at 50%. We're well past that. Okay, so we talked about how I think it's KB Home Builders, cancellation rates for new home builds is at like 68%. That's almost 3/4 of the new homes that they're building people are backing out of. We're seeing a slowdown in building starts. And again, how do builders make their money? They make their money building homes. How are they going to make money if they're not building homes? They aren't going to make money. Only 2% of mortgages are underwater. Okay. I'm having a hard time reading my my notes here, but I think currently, right now, only 2% of mortgages are underwater. Back during the housing crash in 2008, that number was as high as 30%. So maybe the real estate market isn't as bad as some of us may think. And just the last story of the day. This is just a rumor at this point, but apparently Walmart is either charging $1 for carts or is going to be charging $1 for carts. Not 100% sure if that's true or not. I think a number of people on TikTok were saying that was the case. But that would be kind of like Aldi. I don't know how many of you guys shop at Aldi, but Aldi, one of the unique things about Aldi is if you want a shopping cart, you have to put a quarter into the shopping cart to release it. And then when you're done with the shopping cart and you return it, you get your quarter back. There's rumors that Walmart is doing something similar, but that Walmart is charging $1 for their carts. That would be a pain in the butt. You know, I can almost always scrounge up a quarter to go grocery shopping at Aldi, but rarely do I necessarily have $1 and change, but $1 and quarters. Anyhow, guys, those are the stories for the day. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button down below. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button down below and ring the bell. And as always, I would love to hear your thoughts, comments, and opinions on anything and everything that we've discussed in today's video, so drop them down below. Again, guys, thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next video, guys. Later, peace.